Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Entrepreneurial Finance. Entrepreneurial Finance in theory, specific. Let's imagine that relationship between an entrepreneur and a capitalist. Or start maybe with a relationship between you, yourself, going to the doctor. You're sick, but do you really have full transparency on what the doctor is doing with you? Actually, this could also be a principal-agent relationship, to some extent at least, because it is a day-to-day problem with two-sided interaction, with information asymmetry, with different goals maybe, and theory has to reflect that. The same in entrepreneurial finance. Start with the doctor. What is a typical principal-agent relationship there? Well, actually, there's first of all limited rationality. Is the patient really describing the symptoms well? Is the doctor examining you as a patient the best way possible? Maybe not. And it's not necessarily a bad thing if someone doesn't do it. It just might not be possible. So there's limited capacity. Maybe the doctor doesn't have the time, or doesn't have you don't want to spend too much money in order to be examined, and so on. So there is, first of all, limited rationality. There's information the one side has and the other side does not have. Secondly, there's always opportunism. Maybe imagine a student who doesn't want to do an exam. So he's going to the doctors and he says, I'm sick. So is he really sick? Well, maybe he's lucky and the doctor says, yeah, you're sick, you can't write the exam. The same with the medicine the doctor prescribes. Is the dosage really appropriate or not? So you can see that if you have this information asymmetry, if information is not divided equally, opportunism can take place. And last but not least, they depend on each other. And it is with the doctors. You need the medicine, so you have to go there, and the doctor can only prescribe the medicine if he talks to you before. Same with a capitalist. A capitalist depends on the entrepreneur because the capitalist wants to make capital gains. On the other hand, the entrepreneur depends on the capitalist because he needs the money and maybe also the informal help. And this is the typical principle of relationship, which also happens in entrepreneurial finance. In entrepreneurial finance, and starting first of all on the right side, you have the agent, which is the capitalist, the financial intermediary in some places, but normally, first of all, the capitalist. And you have the principal, who is the entrepreneur. And the agent invests money into the entrepreneur and hopes to get more money back. So this is how they depend on each other. But maybe the entrepreneur doesn't want to sell his company. He wants to run his company forever. And he hides that information from the capitalist. And the capitalist has a problem. And this is a typical situation where you have information asymmetry because the capitalist can't really look into the entrepreneur knowing whether he wants to sell the company or not. But the capitalist relies on the entrepreneur because in order to make money, he has to sell his shares one day. And especially if he is a financial intermediary, especially if he gets money from other investors and is just investing other people's money, which, for example, for instance, a venture capitalist does. Venture capital people, they take money from others, they invest it into entrepreneurs, and they give the money back to others. So there's another principal agent relationship. However, that makes it very complicated. So first of all, focus on the right side. You have the agent, who's a capitalist. You have the entrepreneur. Information is not divided equally. That means that opportunism can take place, but the two depend on each other. So what do you do in these situations? Well, actually, it depends at what stage of relationship you look at. Do you look before they did the deal, which is the left side here, or after they did the deal? Before they do the deal, so when an entrepreneur and a capitalist get to know each other, then The one has to do a deal screening, for example, which the capitalist has to look at potential deals, potential portfolio companies. But also you as an entrepreneur, you have to look at your capitalist. Is he really a nice person? I mean, you're giving away shares. So is he a nice person? Or is he using his shares, his control power to influence your decisions to an extent which you don't want? So this is the double-sided orientation, or this is a double-sided problem to some way. Because there's hidden characteristics from the entrepreneur and the capitalist, both sides. And if they don't look at the potential relationship in a good way, they end in an adverse selection. So it might be that the capitalist invests into companies that are not making money, and on the other side, the entrepreneur obtains capital from someone who's not helping him. After the deal has taken place, there's a single-sided asymmetry, because the capitalist, in that case the venture capitalist, has to prevent hidden action and hidden information. So is the entrepreneur hiding something? For example, his company doesn't go too well. Is he really providing that information, or is he hiding that information? Maybe the entrepreneur only does business class flights. Is the entrepreneur telling that to the capitalist, or is he hiding his hidden action of taking business class flights? And this is so-called moral hazard. And in order to prevent that, actually the capitalist has to do an extensive screening before he invests, and afterwards he has to get information on a regular basis, and he has to try to align his interest to the interest of the entrepreneur, or the other way around. He has to align the entrepreneur's interest to his interest. So he has to use, for example, contractual details in the finance contract that can force the entrepreneur to sell his company. Is that really necessary? Well, if you look at current examples, and this is the example of Motion Loft, it looks like it is necessary. Because Motion Loft was basically run by John Mills, the former CEO right now. At that time, he was the CEO. And John Mills received high amounts of funding by convincing business angels, telling them the Motion Loft already got acquired and promised high returns for the investor. If you can promise high returns, investors love to hear that. But there was still some information asymmetry, because there was no one who wanted to buy Motion Loft. And actually, John Mills, he took the money, and you can see it over here. It is close to $38 million. And he took his money, he spent it for partying in Las Vegas and in Palm Springs. It's a nice life, partying for $38 million in Las Vegas and Palm Springs. However, this is not what the capitalist wants if he invests into a company. Now the CEO doesn't have his position anymore, and he is accused of defrauding. That's the end of the story. But you can see that it is necessary to look at that relationship also a little theoretically in order to prevent that kind of behavior, in order to use the principal agent theory the best way also to build that relationship.